It was an animal attack, spin-off episode selected.
I just remembered we don't have an intro for this one because it's a spin-off.
Welcome to the expanded universe of the Vampire Diaries. There's an Irish vampire named Remmick. He's one of Klaus's wayward proteges.
Are there any Irish vampires in the Vampire Diaries universe? Well, first of all, for those of you who are listening and don't usually listen to this podcast, our voices are somewhat similar. I'm Sandile.
And I'm Fadzai.
Are there Irish vampires in the TVD universe? Because there is one in Buffy, of course. We have Angelus.
Birth name Liam. Very Irish name. No, I can't think of...
Can't think of one?
I mean, if there was, it'd be like a canon thing, because you know TVD doesn't really bother with accents.
Yeah.
Unlike True Blood, which really tries, and Buffy, which tries and fails.
Ooh. Yeah, we don't usually plan these in advance, but we're here to talk about double bill of some vampire movies because we talk about vampires here. I mean, we talk about supernatural stuff in general, but vampire movies in the last couple months. Was Nosferatu also this year?
No, Nosferatu
It's
was
2024,
last year.
the movie. But when did we watch it?
We watched it last year, Nosferatu.
Did we watch it last year?
Yeah.
Damn. Time flies, man. It honestly feels like...
We're halfway through the year. Someone on TikTok pointed out that we are closer to 2050 than we are to the year 2000. And I was like, leave me alone with your facts and your science.
Didn't need to know that at all, especially today when I'm feeling my age. There's a fatigue that lives in me. This cold is getting to my bones. Like, I have to be somewhere this evening and I'm truly considering just like staying in and wrapping myself in a blanket like a burrito. But, okay, so within the last year, I guess, we've seen two vampire movies, two very iconic ones for different reasons. That's Nosferatu and Sinners.
We can move on to the one that we do love more, sorry to say. I mean, I love Nosferatu, but this film...
This film was a religious experience, and not the religion brought to our shores by the white man. This was the religion of blackness. This was the religion of culture, of connectivity, of community, and of just being that bitch, okay? This movie changed my life. We did not see this movie together. I watched it with some friends at the Labia Theater, which is a movie theater that, if written down, is awkward to share with somebody. So... let me say nothing further than that. But the thing about the Labia is that it's in Gardens. And if you're not from here, you may not be aware that Gardens is an area of a particular demographic, class-wise, and therefore race-wise, because those intersect in this country as they do in many places. So it was somewhat of an experience to watch this blackety-black vampire movie Sinners in the presence of about 70 to 80% people of the Caucasus variety. But yeah, what was your experience of it?
Just the cinematography, so beautiful. The story, I love a story that is just, you know, once upon a time and then the end, wrapped up with a neat little bow. There's no sequels. There's no need for anything else to be said. It did what it set out to do.
Yeah, well, it's Hollywood, so don't hold your breath necessarily, but I take your point.
I loved the performances of everyone in the cast, even if not every actor in the cast is... is the most popular right now because of their personal decisions and their personal lives.
Yeah.
But we won't get into that.
We can't.
Also, just a physically stunning cast. My goodness. One of the things that I saw before I even watched the film was a tweet about... I forget the actress's name. I'm sure you remember it. But Annie's actress.
Wanmi Mosaku.
Yes, her. Who they had a screenshot of her from Sinners where she looks gorgeous. And they were like... So why were y'all dressing her up and making her look horrid in Loki season 1?
No, because
they were like, they did my girl dirty.
B13 or whatever she was called in that boxy security outfit. My ma'am looks stunning. She was in that awful movie Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice looking stunning when she was being forced to testify falsely against Superman. I don't know if you remember that.
I've watched that film all of one time, so I forgot that.
She's the one who's like, first he came, and then there was fire, and then the whole courtroom blows up or something. She was in that and she looked gorgeous. She's in an episode of Black Mirror and she looks stunning in that. I don't know what that Loki show was doing.
I guess in that kind of a job, she's not meant to look stunning, but I'm like, I don't know. But yeah, just the music aspect as well. I did say this to you before in private, but I was like, this film combines two of my favorite things, vampires and music. So that's great. It was obviously going to be a hit for me. Also, very, very interesting conversations about race and culture and ancestry, even certain things that I had missed when I watched it that I then like went and looked up, and I was like, oh, I this kind of stuff would not have been obvious to me because I'm not a historian or I'm not an American. Yeah, just loved that film.
Firstly, to your point, to get it out of the way, on the physically stunning cast, I did make a tweet about Sinners back when I just watched it, like a week after. I quoted someone showing a BTS photo of, it's Lee Jun Lee who plays, what's the Chinese store owner lady's name? I just remember Bo is her husband's name, but I don't remember the actor's name.
I've forgotten her name. But yes, I know who you mean.
But the two of them in a BTS photo looking stunning, as you say. And I quoted it and I said, I needed every couple in that movie to see me across the pond like my vibe, actually. And it went viral. So that was fun, but that's all I'll say on the physicality of things. To watch this movie in the time period that it's set, having not just come out of, but because it's a media and a franchise that has persisted in the fandom circles and online, but having watched this after Interview with the Vampire, on the ladder of things where I experience a media that's trying to do something and then years later experience a different one that does it better. Interview with the Vampire, the show, was an improvement upon past media in terms of racial dynamics as pertains to the supernatural and just like how that intersects with real life. This movie is an improvement on even that, because by the time Interview season 2 rolled around, which, as we both agree, better than season 1, it left me at the end feeling like there's some stuff here that I'm not super happy with, that I think Sinners healed in my soul in the way that this movie was done. I think it's gorgeous. There's such a rhythm to this movie. You said music is so important. I think it's important in the scenes that contain music, but also just to the whole movie. And that makes sense given, especially music in the States, all the music that people like typically originated with Black folk. So speak on it. And we're going to be speaking maybe a little too casually about race relations in the United States, which we are not from. But the thing about being Black in this world is that even though there are very many different ways to be Black, there are a lot of similarities in their experiences. So trust that a thing we're talking about is probably a thing we have felt. Okay, right out the gate, Smoke and Stack, the Smokestack twins, both played by Michael B. Jordan. It's so funny to think about the fact that they were going to have Jonathan Majors play one of these characters. I'm so glad that didn't happen.
Reality collapsing in on itself. Someone traveled back in time and said, let me change this one detail in history.
And shift the timeline. But then this man then went and vocalized it. Fine, we're not getting into it. It's fine. I'm always so delighted by a character who can play identical characters so distinct. We come from the school of Vampire Diaries, where on CW Network TV, Miss Nina Dobrev is twirling circles as 4 different people. We've seen, I don't know if you've seen Orphan Black? Was that what it's called? God, I love that show. It's got Tatiana Maslany who played She-Hulk.
I haven't seen it, but we discussed it, I think, because I brought up that I was watching some YouTube review that referenced her as a very good example of an actress playing different versions of the same face.
It terrifies me how good she is at playing, I think by the end it was in the 10s or the 20s how many distinct versions of herself she plays. Terrifying, that woman. She needs to be more booked and busy. MBJ in that space, maybe not quite on the level of Tatiana Maslany, specifically in this quality of playing distinct people, but Smoke and Stack fully felt like different people to me. I was mesmerized. Of course, we're a couple of smokes in this house, for better or worse, I would say. I think you're closer to the Stack side of the spectrum. I am embodied in smoke. The scene where he speaks to Annie and Stack at the bar, where they're being like really cavalier about how we're sorting out payment and how A, B, and C, and Smoke's just like, we're trying to run a business. I understand you want to be like really nice and chill, but we can't be chill at the expense of our livelihood, people. And he's like, I don't know magic, I don't talk slick, but I know business. I felt him so intrinsically in that moment. I was like, Smoke, I get you, fam. You got me too. I think they're a lot of fun. I think as brothers, they're really endearing. They feel very familiar. They feel like brothers you would know, you know? I've encountered like twin brothers a number of times in my real life in prolonged periods, and the dynamic is very like, I say they, Michael B. Jordan. The dynamic is very much
whatever Michael B. J.'s pronouns might be.
We respect their pronouns. But yeah, they're a lot of fun. Annie has to be the immediate next one I think of because she is everything to me.
The Van Helsing of the group, quite frankly.
Precisely. Precisely that. The moment she showed up, the first 10 minutes, I was like, okay, because you know going in, we're going to encounter vampires at some point. So you have to ask, is this a world where people know about the supernatural? Are we discovering the supernatural? What are the parameters of the supernatural? And when he walks into that shop and she's got like substances and shelves of things, I like sat up in my seat and went, yes. Out loud. I went, yes. Give me that. And then when she steps towards him, when she's a little bit like angry because he said something that's pissed her off, and you see that effect on the sides of her face with the like the wavy energy, and I'm like, oh, this shit is real. Oh, this shit is real, and they're straight up telling you it's real. Very good.
And every time I see something like that, in particular from an African-American character and African-American women in this sort of a supernatural setting, I'm always like, if maybe there'd been some damn black influence, black voices in that writing room that had enough power to save Bonnie and her family.
The way, because we rarely see, usually as you say, when we see African-American women being portrayed as connected to magic and power, it's often tokenizing, it's often tropey, it's often missing the like underlying, the aspect that's like displacement, because as they say and they make clear in this movie, and I appreciated this so much, especially again, I say this with love, the sense of some Black Americans and their disdain for Africa. This movie takes pains to tell you that that's where you come from, babe. Yes, there's a removal there because of one of the most horrifying acts in history perpetrated by the Western world. There is a break there, there is a snap there, and a lot of people are not aware of or struggle to find that connection to Africa. But when it comes to this thing of like hoodoo and voodoo and all these practices that exist in the States, is because it was transported over through the transatlantic slave trade. It's people carrying over their beliefs from West Africa and the surrounding region. And this movie does not shy away from that, and I really appreciated it. But yes, to your point that like the care taken to detail and the underpinning of that idea of magic being that connection to Africa, that bloodshed and the horror that was experienced, and the tie to ancestry, the tie to your roots, because there's also like root work is involved in that as well, I believe, is the stuff that's often missing when people attempt this from a different perspective, shall we say, to be polite. No, we don't need to be polite this in this episode when white people write this shit. Like, why am I holding myself back? And God, if the Bennett bloodline, ooh, what a different show that would be. I mean, we see it in the originals a little bit.
A little
that they
bit.
at least try some.
Yeah.
But never enough.
But and Bonnie especially, Bonnie's ancestry stretches back to like pre-colonization of the Americas, because we see Ayana, we see the Witch of the Five, we see Ketsia, whereas the whole New Orleans vibe of the originals is very much focused on what was happening in the States with black people. So it's like, Bonnie, the magic can often feel very Western and like they're not trying too much. We get to Ketsia where it's like we're not even sure what race Ketsia is meant to be.
Vaguely Greek, maybe North African, who
Vaguely
knows?
Greek.
Persian?
She dresses up as Cleopatra, which confuses us more. And then it's also like she's played by a South Asian actress, so we don't know what's happening. But
there's definitely a lot more thought put in, for sure, in Sinners.
yeah, and I do appreciate that with the vampirism aspect of it all, it is Annie's knowledge of the supernatural that eventually helps them fight. In the beginning, she keeps referring to them as haints, which I'd never heard of before, and I initially just assumed was some sort of region-specific way of referring to vampires, or like era-specific way of referring to vampires from that part of the world.
I believe she's referring to a different thing in that moment, because at the crux moment,
I then looked it up and found out that haints comes from the word haunt. It's some sort of like ghost, like evil spirit. I don't know if it is able to spread its curse the way vampires do, because that's something that she says, which is why I initially thought she just meant vampires, because she was like, oh yeah, turning other people into themselves, that's what haints do. And then eventually she realizes, oh no, these are just vampires. And then she like details the ways to fight them. And she's the one with all the knowledge. She's the one who's correct. She mentions holy water as one of their weaknesses, but because of the venue that most of the film takes place in, they don't have access to holy water. So it's also interesting that that Christian aspect of it is also essentially useless in the story. And we have to go back to these like pre-Christian roots in order to fight the supernatural evil.
That's so true, because when she mentioned that, I was like, well, they're setting this up. It's probably going to pay off at some point. And there was a point later in the movie where Remmick is holding Sammy, trying to drag him into the river. And in my head, I don't usually do this in movies because I guess I'm never engaged enough to try. A lot of people try to predict what happens before it happens, and I'm very much somebody who's here for the ride. But in that moment, I was like doing the maths to be like, okay, so he's a pastor's son, so there's like a connection there, even though he himself is not hugely religious. And Remmick is speaking about saying a prayer or some sort of shit like that. So it's like, somebody's gonna pray over this river and it's all gonna turn into holy water and it's gonna burn him. And none of that happened.
He prays, and Remmick is like, actually, despite the way that I was screwed over by Christians when they came to Ireland, I actually always found comfort in this prayer, and starts reciting the prayer with him. And it's like, yeah, that's not going to do anything to this vampire.
Not gonna do anything. That's so funny. I actually really resonate with that statement, because as someone who is formally religious, the one thing I miss about being religious, and it's a thing that's not isolated to religion, but that's how they play it, is the thing. That's the whole thing with the pastor in this movie does it, is the music. It's the music that's just like, there's this neuro shit that's going on when you're in a group of people all singing this specific type of music that's very collective, that's very emotional, that like puts you in a place that's just like, damn, where else do I find this? And it's like, you can find this in other places. You just have to find community. You have to build community for yourself. Anyway, go on.
No, that was all I wanted to say about that. I mean, unless we want to segue into the preacher boy.
Oh, what were we saying before that then? Because I feel like there's a loop we left open.
We were just speaking about like the very Afrocentric, I guess, sort of magic, or certainly the diaspora in that part of the world, and how I just found it interesting that while she mentions this typical Christian way of fighting vampires, it was like, oh, you know, the crucifix, the holy water, she brings that up, but that's not something that they use. And at the very end, when he tries to pray while in the water, whether he was trying to bless the water or just pray for some sort of divine intervention, it doesn't work. But what did work was the knowledge that she had that was outside of the framework of like Christian beliefs.
The thing I was going to say on that is that the expectation set up is also affirmed by the fact that a lot of black peoples, usually African originated black peoples, their spiritual practices intersect with some version of Christianity because of colonialism. So a lot of the like South American, like black American spiritual practices like hoodoo, voodoo, you'll sometimes find that there's an aspect of Orthodox Christianity that's woven in there. The saints of spirituality will be side by side with the saints of Christianity in a way that's like now inextricable. And you find that here as well, to speak a little bit about my own experiences with spirituality, because I come from a family that, it's interesting, because the era we're in now is so modern, But whenever I go back to Durban and there's stuff to do for the family, there are actually a lot of spiritual practices that we still hold to and that we are expected to continue with as we continue to have family. And it's this thing that's like difficult to reconcile with my day-to-day life of being like someone who works in finance and lives in the city and like all this stuff of like the modern world, but also growing up Christian. Like a lot of Black people in this country who do hold to spiritual practices are also Christian because of colonialism. And it's in a way that's inextricable, because if you ask Black people today, the Lord is real and the Lord is good, regardless of whatever happened prior. Loop it back to Sinners, it's a very similar experience to Black spirituality in the States, and it makes me appreciate more, as you say, that that's not what saved them in the end.
I'm always interested by how Africans and those of the diaspora, when it comes to how Christianity has flavored their beliefs and vice versa, how their beliefs have flavored Christianity. Because there's like a version of voodoo in America that is very Christian, which is obviously not the way that it was in, you know, the West African voodoo originally. I guess it makes sense when you think about even the flavor of Christianity that reached Africa and all these places during the colonial era had already been filtered through this European lens, where it was like not what had come from the Middle East. You see it with so many folkloric beliefs of what exactly do angels and demons look like. It's like if you go back far enough, there's all these equivalents that already existed with like, you know, the fair folk and, you know, elves and dark elves and that kind of a thing. I find that interesting. I know that the word in my parents' mother tongue, in Shona, for God is Mwari, M-W-A-R-I, but that word predates Christianity, which I only discovered like in my adult life. And then I was like, well, yeah, obviously that makes sense. That word pre-Christianity, pre-colonialism was the Shona word for the genderless creator of all things.
So real, so true.
And I was like, interesting that unfortunately that word was then appropriated as just, your translation of God, the Christian God, who, even though in many ways is sort of genderless, a lot of, you know, European Christianity will be like, no, God is a he, him, God is a
he, him pronouns only, respect God's pronouns.
Or at least, because you could even say God is non-binary but uses he, him, that's also valid. But the very European Christian thing is to be like, no, God is he, him, and male.
And a man. And don't you forget it. Just quickly before you go on, similarly in Zulu culture, I believe there is the name that we use today, I believe predates Christianity. Nkulunkulu means like God now, and it's what people say when they refer to God when they pray via Christian means. But I believe it's the initial creator of the Zulu people who, I can't remember the story exactly, but he's like personified by the sky, because the sky you see in a lot of like creation myths, regardless of origin. And there's like reeds. I think he made the first Zulu people from like a place that had a lot of reeds, which is just probably a significant place of the people who wrote that, or well, not wrote, we weren't writing back then, it was all oral tradition, but who came up with these myths. It was just like, well, the reeds surround us, so this must be where we came from. But that all predates the advent of colonialism and of Christianity. But it is now the word we use for God across the board.
I find that so interesting. I wish I had an easier means of like going back and finding out what did y'all believe about this word and who it was describing before missionaries came along and said, yeah, that's just God.
You're
that's
already
Jesus'
with the memo.
Dad.
But it's also Jesus. Love the Trinity. But yeah, getting back to wow, that was very beneficial, but very long tangent. I love it. Smoke, Stack, Annie, Mary, quite contrary, in a lot of ways. A character who's caused a stir, and interestingly so.
I think we live in an age where a lot of people are poised and ready to fight.
Yeah.
Battle ready, weapons in their hands. And then when you have a film like this in this era, with the cast that it does, with the actress playing Mary who is playing her, who is like, in real life, she's literally what she's playing. So it's like, you can't now complain that in terms of character versus actor, ethnic background, there's something that's gone awry there. I'm like, well, this is what it is. And this is the story they are intentionally trying to tell about this whole, the concept of white passing and what that might be and how that looks and how it reads to people on either side of that like racial fence. And how integrated one can be into that community, or whether or not one can or should step out of it, because that is something that comes up in the film when she speaks to is it now I'm confusing.
Stack.
It's Stack. She
Stack's
speaks
the
to
red
Stack.
cap, yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, you left me high and dry, ran away." And he's like, "No, I got you a white husband so that you could have a good life with your white passing self."
Because as he says, you would never have had a moment of peace being married to me the way that people perceive us, which is very true. It's in a situation where people have perspectives on something and both of them are making a point.
And she mentions, I think she says her mother's father was half black.
That's correct.
So I'm like, yeah, that is pretty far back. I don't know how that would have read exactly in that era. We know there's the one drop rule in America and the context in which that exists and why it exists. I'm pretty sure if any of the racist whites knew what her background was, they would have been like, "Oh no, definitely, she's one of them. One of the African Americans,"
and that's the point.
She is beneath
That's
us.
the point, right? Is that like that's the point of passing? And there's a conversation with the movie Passing, which a lot of people were frustrated by because the actresses that they cast were not passing by the definition of the time. Haley Steinfeld is who the character would be that could pass. They cast Ruth Negga and Tessa Thompson to play in Passing, and then they made it black and white to kind of make it. It doesn't help.
Yeah. Tessa Thompson, in an American context, people look at that woman and they're like, "This is a black woman, very clearly."
Right. Oh yeah, I forget she's British.
No, I think she is American. She just does a very good British accent in Thor. Wow. Yeah. To my surprise, I thought that she was British when I saw her play Valkyrie, and then I found out that she's American.
Okay, go Tessa Thompson. Love the accent. But it really depends, because it was like, by law, as you say, the one drop rule, she would be black. Looking at her, as a lot of people in the movie encounter her, perceive her as a white woman, but there's a particular sect of white people who would be race vestigating to be like, and now let me see by the features of, who maybe be able to like divine that 1/16th and then start some shit. And that's the conflict.
Even if they couldn't see it with their eyes, just the knowledge. Because sometimes what people know then informs what they see. They'll be like, "No, I can tell. You see that a lot with all sorts of different investigating that happens. Even in the modern era, where because someone has the information, then they claim, "No, I can tell. I can see.
I can tell." And it's like, no, babe, I promise you're not doing as well as you think you are. And that's the conflict, because it puts a lot of people, not to be like the plight of the mixed race, but it is the plight of the mixed race. It puts people in a very odd position. It's not quite the same issue, but a similar issue that colored people faced in this country when it comes to proximity to blackness, because the whole argument in both these cases, the one drop rule and what we had here, was the pencil test. So the proximity to blackness is the thing that's undesirable, and so your life now becomes, as much as possible, a denial of your own black ancestry and a distancing of your own black ancestry, because that feature, that kink in your halo, that could get you like in a much worse position. And then that also interplays with what the power dynamics that spin out in future coming out of that, because then you can also achieve a level of some standing in a society that is incentivizing you to reject that blackness. And the thing I like about Mary is she doesn't reject that blackness. She comes into that movie all in. She's like, "Boy, get the fuck out of my face." I love that line. She loves her community. She loves Annie so much. She speaks so casually and comfortably with the Smokestack twins. She's really in that bit. People greet her so warmly, the people who know her, because they know her family, her black family. I found that very touching.
And she's one of two women in this movie who are mentioned as having husbands who just don't show up on screen. I love it.
Love to see it.
I don't know if Mary has left her husband at this point, because when Stax talks about him, he's like speaking about, "Oh, before I left, I set you up with like a good thing." And she speaks about him like, "Ugh, yeah, I didn't want that though. You didn't ask me if it was what I wanted." And I'm curious as to, did this white man that he set her up with, like, was he aware of the fact that she has black ancestry? Probably
I would assume not, if the point was to set her up in white society so she could pass. Probably not. Maybe he found out and that's why they split. I think if he died, they would have mentioned it, because they bring attention to the fact that her mom has recently died. So I think it would have come up.
Because that's the thing you see a lot, like in real life, people whose ancestry, usually people who exist in like a sphere of whiteness, but not always, but people who have found out long after the fact that, oh, there's someone in my lineage who is not the race that I was told they were, or that the family believed they were, because of the advantages in whatever era and whatever area that came from passing or, letting people assume you were a certain thing. I know that in South Africa, much to the chagrin of certain people, there was some genetic research done on our white Afrikaner population that found out a lot of them have significant African ancestry.
See, the thing that happens when you do slavery and colonialism is a lot of your grandpappies were using women in ways that we will not speak about today. And so you've got a little blood in you that you would hate to learn about. So remember that shit. But yeah, Mary as a vampire is so much fun. The way she dances around is just so funny.
I like that before she became a vampire, I like that when our three major white characters show up and are turned away and told, this is a space by us and for us, please go away. They're like, well, what about her? Why is she allowed here? And Annie immediately sticks up for her and is like, no, she's one of us. She's family. And she doesn't elaborate. She's like, I'm not going to explain to you, but everyone here understands the context in which she exists and why she's here. Mind your business.
Interesting to bring up Kamala in that moment, but yeah, not Kamala. I'm thinking of Kamala Khan, who has a comic going on right now. But anyway,
the far better Kamala.
Clock it. Who would be after Mary? Preacher Boy. Yes, you mentioned Preacher Boy Sammy. Couldn't hear a thing you were saying, and I didn't care. What a pretty boy.
That is the way he speaks. I've heard him speaking in interviews, so that's very much his voice.
It's also my hearing, which is bad. We were not made for each other, unfortunately.
It was a combination of the way he speaks and then the southern accent layered on top of that, because I think he is from the East Coast, like New Yorkie.
He's just hitting a frequency, a depth of frequency that my ears cannot pick up. He is so low down there. And I respect that for him. He's going to kill it at the blues. He does, as we know. We see him when he's 90. I missed like half of his dialogue. Great character, though. Again, religious trauma. I get it. Black religious trauma. I get it.
Ooh, something I loved that I had not realized, because this film, in a very nice way that often a lot of popular films don't allow their audience to do nowadays, they don't spell everything out for you. They're like, the girls that get it. I've seen arguments online with people who missed things that were very obvious to other people and yada, yada, yada. Something that I had not realized at the time was that one of the things that ultimately makes him reject his father's offer of like reconciliation is that he recognizes that the sort of language that his father is using to like bring him into the fold and welcome him to the church community is kind of exactly what Remmick was saying when he was like, join my vampire cabal. Become one with my hive mind. Yeah. Let us be beautiful together.
The lure of the easy promise, the promise that your problems can be solved by this one trick, this one silver bullet, this thing that you just have to buy into, and then you become that for the rest of your life. Absolutely, yes. I just also, and someone tweeted about this right after the movie, so I cannot take credit for it, but like someone being like, his dad seeing him come back covered in blood, scratches, holding like a piece of his broken guitar left, and taking that opportunity not to care for his hurt son, but to spin it into a lecture? To spin it into a preaching sermon? Satan.
I love that he doesn't even wonder what's going on. He's like, no, this is clearly that devil music that I told you to stay away from.
This is that devil music you were playing.
Ironically, his father right, but not in the way that he thought he would be when he was like, that music's gonna invite dangerous things into your life, son. And I'm like, well, yes, but only because a dangerous thing happened to be passing by at the exact moment.
It was flying around the States already, as like, I know metaphorically we suggest, but it's not his fault. No one told him he had this gift. Just the again, because it hit me so deeply, the religious thing. I've told you this, the fact that when I was 18 and I'd already stopped going to church for some time, but we would go occasionally for certain events. And so at 18, I got my ears pierced on my birthday because I was like, I don't know, I just wanted to get a piercing, but I had to really fight my parents on it because we were in a lot of ways a very conservative family. This was just a symbol of like, well, you know, I'm an adult now and I have my own freedom and agency or whatever within the confines of still being in a Black African family. So I got the piercings, and then I went to church the one time after having not been there in some time, and I had the piercings, and the pastors, who had not seen me in years, felt compelled to ask me, "Well, why did you pierce your ears?" And I was like, I kind of wanted to for some time, and they were like, "No, but you shouldn't do." And the interesting thing is they didn't tie it to anything like specifically religious, and that's how all this shit intersects, is they made it like a gender thing.
Because that's like kind of all they have to go on. Because they're like, the thing I've seen with certain, because if you pull the thread enough, it's like, okay, but why should a person not dress this way? And they're like, there's nothing in the religious scripture that is like, this is inherently sinful. And they're like, but this thing says that you shouldn't wear the garments of the other gender. And then it's like, what were people even wearing thousands of years ago when this was written?
People were using the straw and the thread that was available to them at the time. We have modern textiles. They were upset that I'd pierced both my ears, which was also the bizarre thing. They were like, well, if it was one ear, it would be fine, but you did both, like a girl. And I was like, I need to never be here ever in my life again. I think this is the affirmation I needed. And I never went back.
Just like Sammy the preacher boy.
Precisely so. I love how much, because he's the youngest character, the most impressionable character, and he's also at this like crux point in his life as a Black man in that time, surrounded by Black men who have either had their path laid out for them or have attempted to carve a new path and met obstruction and resistance. And it's like, Sammy, what is your journey going to be? Because you're being told a lot of stuff from the left and from the right and from the sideways. How do you determine within the power structure you exist how you're going to forge your own path ahead? And that makes him a really, really interesting character to be at the like center of all this.
Last human man standing by the epilogue.
Yeah. Very, very specific distinction. Who else is?
There's Pearline.
The main of it. Say again.
Pearline, the one who gets a whole band named after her after one hookup. She left an impression.
Had the best sex of her life and started crawling on that stage.
Love it.
Like an interpretive dancer. Good for you, girl.
She's
Let
howling.
the animal out.
She's a jungle cat. She's a wolf. I was like, okay, I see
girl.
you.
Hey, good for you. May we all experience. I loved her. I love when she refuses to eat the garlic and they're like, girl, if you don't stand your ass up.
The tension in that scene. It was like, is she a vampire? Are you deliberately putting a red herring in front of us? Because I was like, if she's a vampire, she's being really obvious about it. Although I will say, there's another character in this movie who is very obvious about something being off when he's trying to get invited inside.
Oh, God, Brad. Oh, I love that scene so much.
Just hilarious.
No, to me, it was. I was like, you had better be a vampire, because if we're spending 2 minutes fighting with you on this shit and you just didn't want to eat a little garlic, girl, I've had family like that.
I'm like, this is literally life or death. And you know, Stack has shown that he is willing to shoot you without hesitation if he thinks something is going on. When he finds Mary feeding off the smoke, she stands up and she's like, that's not what it looks like. And he riddles her with bullets. Doesn't ask a second question. Just tries to kill her immediately.
That's why they call him Smoke. I truly can't stress how much every character at some points just feels like somebody you know or somebody you're related to, who's just like, you just feel it in your heart in that moment. Like, oh, I've dealt with you before. Yeah, there's Bo and I need to look her up.
Bo and Grace. Grace is his wife's name.
Grace. Bo and Grace. Let me be very clear. I defend Grace's decision to put everyone in danger and fight the vampires into that juke joint. Because let me tell you, if some old-ass vampire started talking to me about how my husband likes to... and then tells me I know where your child is. My child.
It was
my
the child thing, because it was
only
like,
child.
they can't go warn little Miss Gurley, who we briefly saw at the beginning of the movie in the
We know
marketplace.
her now. We know her cute little face. We can't let her die at the hands of this man. No, I'm building that Molotov cocktail. I'm screaming out.
I mean, she does what she set out to do. Ultimately, she
Exactly.
does manage to kill Bo, which I was like, that was the major threat, I guess, for her child. That her husband was now a vampire and could show up at their house and be like, let me in, my daughter. It's your father.
She said none of that shit. It's so tragic and romantic that they burn up together too. Oh, God. Oof, loved them.
And Remmick, the psychic connection that these vampires share through this bloodline, when Remmick starts speaking to her in Chinese, and I was like, how dare you?
Rude.
Another thing that I hadn't noticed that I had to see elsewhere. Apparently, I could be wrong because I haven't watched the film in a bit, but apparently when, I forget their daughter's name, but when she crosses the street to go and get her mom, she goes to like the other side where her mother is apparently working apart from the black people. And that whole like camera shot following her mother going all the way back is to show that she does have the ability to cross back and forth as a POC who isn't black. And I thought that was very interesting. If it's true, if these are lies I'm being peddled, I apologize. I'll have to go back and watch.
I mean, that's the kind of law. We're very familiar with segregation laws. That's exactly the sort of shit I'd expect. But yeah, look it up yourself and confirm that, listener, because we are not. Lisa is their child's name.
Lisa, okay.
Yeah. Lisa.
Poor
Child.
Lisa, what became of her at the end of the film?
I hope someone took care of her. I don't know. I can't imagine that whole community was taken out. A lot of them were. Everyone who was at that juke joint, certainly. All the sinners, I guess.
Yeah, they all got let out, and like the main like cast are like, oh, there's vampires out there, and I was like, yeah, but you let like all your patrons go out into the night. Aren't they gonna be eaten? And the next time we see them, they're out there doing this Irish jig.
It was a crisis moment. They did not foresee. I can't blame them. Stack was literally dead in their home, so you know. But yeah, let's get into Remmick now that we've because I intentionally was like, let's leave him for last because frankly he's been first in the conversations for too long at this point, so we'll leave him for last right at the beginning. And this is why I mentioned the Romani people specifically in Nosferatu, because it's a scene that energetically made me think of this first scene of Remmick in this movie, where the Choctaw, the Native American people, are chasing after Remmick, have beaten his ass and have him on the run. I kept seeing pictures of it this week of him with the black eye and all burnt up as he's knocking on the KKK's door. Beautiful. All decked out in black with their hats, their guns and shit. Oh, they look so badass. And I love that the most like maligned group of that time and in that region and in this time still like remain marginalized. You think of Romani people and you think of indigenous Americans who have the knowledge that is needed to face this like evil thing, who know where to be and where not to be at a certain time, who look at the sun coming down and said, well, it's not our problem now, we're going home.
The comments that I've seen about that interaction are so funny. The general consensus is like, hey, they were like, we tried. We tried. We're not going to beg. We're not going to plead. We asked once and you said no. I saw a comment where someone was like, they spotted those white hoods and they were like, actually, no, y'all have the evening you deserve. Bye.
That's good. That's good. Oh, yeah. Remmick, as you say, Irishman, Irish jig. Love to see it. Jack O'Connell. There's a bit to say about him and race in this movie, right? And I'm sure a lot of people have had many a discourse on the matter, because I saw a lot of people citing an interview that Ryan Coogler, auteur, brilliant mind behind this movie, and the Black Panthers, he mentions that Remmick predates race because he's this hundreds of years old Irish figure. He comes in talking about like the conquest of the Emerald Isles by the English. People took that and ran with it to suggest that this movie didn't have themes of like white liberalism or like assimilationist whiteness still being a threat to black people and other people of color, all that stuff. I saw a lot of people online being very resistant to the idea of Remmick still representing some sort of racial discussion at the very least, if not allegory. And I was curious about that. Because, and you and I, Fadza, have had this discussion already, is that even if Remmick predates those structures, he exists now.
Yeah.
He's been in the States for some time, seeing as the Choctaw are on his ass. As perceived, especially by the KKK, the biggest arbiter of race relations at the time, that is a white man. So he is clearly still using those structures to his benefit, right?
Absolutely.
For his own safety.
He begs to be let in, clocks the white hoods, and is like, oh, did I mention that POCs are chasing me?
It's like, oh, I would never use the N-word, but the Indians are on the way. And it's like, ooh, so you will extort the systems put in place. Interesting.
And it's interesting because if they knew of his Irish ancestry, they'd be far less receptive to him in that time. Maybe even now. I'm not sure what the KKK gets up to now. I just know that they're anti-Semitic
We
and
don't keep
anti-black.
track of their antics,
But
yeah.
I know they're anti-Semitic, anti-black, and anti-Catholic. So I assume...
We can throw in anti-Irish in there for shits and gigs.
But yeah, it's interesting that he probably knows, given that he's exploiting his knowledge of the KKK, he knows that if they knew about the Irish background, of which he is quite proud and quite comfortable to bring up later on in the movie when it suits his need, they would not let him through that door. But he's like, no, look at me, I'm a white man and they already killed my wife. I'm being hate crimed by these POCs. Let me in, I beg.
Love it. Very happy to explore the system. He's a vampire. He's a monster. The whole ideal of vampirism, and we've discussed this regarding the Confederates of Confederate vampires that exist in multitude in vampire media. The idea of vampirism, power, and class. The idea of someone with a leg up sort of feeding on people of a lower social standing. So it's like, even if it wasn't the intention, and I doubt that it wasn't, like Ryan Coogler seems like a very smart and focused and attention to detail style man. I'm sure that that's what we're playing in. But even if it wasn't, the question's been posed, right? Because you've placed this white man as your villain against a cast of black people. You have this white man effectively enslave a bunch of black people, despite his assertions that, hey, I'm inviting you to join my circle of people. I'm offering you this gift. This is why I was thinking of Interview with the Vampire, because I was thinking of Lestat.
A dog
and
gift.
I can swap it out for a dog gift.
And the power you can't even imagine.
Coming to black people in their time of greatest need and of greatest struggle, well, I mean currently, and going, here's a way out. And it's a way that I'm not super gonna make clear what that lived experience is going to be for you. But as far as I'm concerned, this is a great way to live. And it'll be a better way to live than the way you're living now, which I am sympathetic to, right? For all intents and purposes, Remmick asserts that this idea of racial segregation and of hierarchy confuses him, it baffles him. He's not really about it, even if he's willing to use it to get away. That's what I find most interesting about the character, and it's just weird that people are resistant to that. I don't know.
And he does seemingly, as far as he is able, sympathize with their plight. He brings up that oh yeah, I lived in pre-Christian Ireland, he implies, when he's referencing the prayer. He's like, I lived in pre-Christian Ireland. Christians, who I guess he's implying are British, came over with this new religion they'd found from mainland Europe, which Europeans had found from the East. They forced it upon us. I also know that in even this era of, I guess they're in 19th century United States, Irish people are very much the bottom of the food chain of white people. It's Irish people and Italian people down there. I'm not sure how many Jewish people there were in America at that time, white Jewish people. It's interesting that he's when he's trying to convince the last remnants of the protagonist to come over to him, he's like, no, I understand that life is rough for you. And by the way, did you know that this club you were so happy to open that was sold to you by white people, those people are from the KKK. They were planning to come here in the morning and gun you all down. This is a trick they've used several times before. How do I know this? Because the two white people I brought with me, who I've now added to my hive mind against their will, I can hear all their thoughts and their memories. I forced them to not see color now. They're super liberal now. But
they're real
a few hours ago, they were KKK members. The guy who sold you this place, I think he says it's the husband's uncle or something like that. And he's like, they've been doing this. They've been selling this property to black people, allowing them to open up businesses here and then killing them the next night and then cleaning up the place and then rinsing and repeating. So I'm an ally. I get it, guys.
Thinking of religion from Heartstopper. I'm not racist. I'm an ally. No, so true, so true. And because the thing you're describing of the struggle he experienced as an ethnic group that was being invaded, that was being oppressed, that was being colonized, which is very true. Even in our real history, the thing that happened when Irish people fled that, or those of whom fled that in the time where a lot of immigration was happening to the United States, Irish people experienced a level of marginalization within the States among white people who did not consider them white at the time, right? The idea of Irish people being white very specifically started to happen when white people, like white English people or WASP people, I lose the category sometimes, but the white people running the show needed to consolidate that power when black people and indigenous people and all the other people that they've decided to mess up over the years needed to be distinctly placed as the other. And so a thing that happened is that Irish people assimilated into that whiteness. And what you found historically is a lot of Irish enslavers and Irish overseers on plantations and Irish people who fully became part of that white experience. The reason Jamaican people, when you hear Jamaican people speak, and it's been noted online a bit, is that the dialect of a lot of Jamaican peoples, if you hear a Jamaican person and an Irish person speaking, you'll hear it start to like blend together in the dialect and the intonation. And that's because there were a lot of Irish enslavers and slave owners in Jamaica and in the Caribbean islands. And so when enslaved people were teaching themselves English, they were learning from Irish people. And look this up again to like get all the proper learned cited information on that. But that is a root, a connection as to why Jamaican people speaking English has that similar rhythm to Irish people speaking English.
And choosing to make a Remmick Irish, because I mean, there's other groups of previously marginalized but now recognized as white Europeans that they could have chosen, as I mentioned. But I think the Irishness of it all was very intentional because one of the first people to have to tussle with the British, and B, there's that whole history of indentured servitude in the United States that often, from a white side, gets misconstrued and conflated with like proper slavery of the transatlantic flavor, where it's like, oh no, but what about Irish slaves? And it's like, indentured servitude, if you actually bother to look it up, is not the same as slavery.
Not great, obviously. Still
it's not great,
you know,
terrible thing, but not the same as
comparable.
Not the same as being property until such time as your owner chooses to let you go, if they ever do, and not the same as being property to the extent that any children you then give birth to are also property of the person that you belong to, which is not how indentured servitude worked.
It's interestingly a similar thing that happened here in South Africa with the enslavement of colored people. This was at the time when the Dutch were bringing over people from like Indonesia and Jakarta at the time, and like a number of different places. Malagasy, I forget where Malagasy specifically is, but a number of different places, and then created this sort of enslaved population within the Cape. And also the oppression of native black peoples in South Africa being reduced to this lesser status. The laws of like, what land can you own? Where can you go? Are you even a citizen of this country? Versus the indentured labor or indentured servitude that South African Indian people face historically. A lot of Indians were brought over by ship to South Africa by the British colonization, because if you didn't know, we were doubly colonized in this country. Love to see it. But there was indentured servitude, which again, also bad. Never to suggest that it wasn't. But there were, like, to whatever extent, papers to that and laws to that and a timeline to that where you work for this extent under terrible conditions. Then when at the end of that, you receive this plot of land and then you begin your new life in South Africa as a person. And as a result, in the resulting hierarchy of race that was set up by the time apartheid rolled around, Indian people were a lot more proximal to white people in the cake that was created. So there's like a sense, if we're speaking confidently about these sorts of dynamics, it's because we are familiar with them, just to let you know.
Yep. again, Remmick being able to move between those spaces, getting with vampire lore, there's a reason that the whole invite is such a this integral part of vampire lore. It's like inviting energy into your house, inviting supernatural malevolence into your house. Beware of whom you let cross through your door, whether it's otherworldly being or just a ordinary human. He's able to get into these people's home fully intending to cause them harm, and yet when the indigenous vampire hunters show up trying to help them and are
Trying
like,
to
hey,
save them.
we're trying to warn you, this lady has a gun trained on them, and is like, and I love that it is the wife. The husband is inside already being eaten by Remmick. She's there. She's like, I don't need no man. I can be racist on my own. She's holding her shotgun. She's like, get off my property. I don't trust you. And then Remmick takes them and is like, listen, you being of the KKK and racist, incidental. It helped me escape. I'm not really interested in that. I'm now going to force you to not be racist anymore. And we're going to go just do our thing. And then happens to come across black people who have something that he wants. And then is like, okay, allow me to move through the space again. Now, a few hours ago, I was just myself. Then I became a racist white person to get these racist white people to save me. Then I can't see color. Now I'm an ally.
I'll be whatever you need me to be, baby.
I'm of Irish descent. I'm going to show off my code switching. Every now and then I'll slip into my Irish accent just to show you this is where I'm from. Let me in because I lost my people during that violent colonization of Ireland. And there's some interesting sort of spiritual connecting with ancestors and descendants from the future, which I've never seen before, happening here music-wise that I think I can use to my advantage. And it's like, Remmick, on no one's side but your own, frankly.
But here's what I will say, because there is an aspect of Remmick that is genuinely seeking community, right? He mentions in the movie that he's been isolated from his kin. And I couldn't tell in that scene if he's talking about just like Irish people in general, his like Irish kin back home, or if he's talking about other vampires, which is why he's trying to make more vampires so that he's not by himself. There is a desire for community that's integral to Remmick's character and informs all the choices he's making. And as part of that, the connection between Irish and black people, despite, the better and worse in the history of it, is undeniable, right? Like you mentioned the Irish jig earlier, and we see that beautiful scene of them, like all these black people who are now vampires dancing to that Irish. What's that song called? He does the little step.
I've forgotten it now.
Got it. It's so good. Pops up.
It's lovely. It's the first time you hear him slipping into his Irish accent.
Proper Irish brogue. You see the beat that black people are keeping to this Irish jig. And this is after that, that brilliant sequence. We don't need to tell you about that sequence. That's so good earlier, about the time and the past.
Which is what draws Remmick there.
Right.
When Sammy is singing and he starts to conjure spirits from the past and the future, and they're dancing amongst their various African and Chinese ancestors, because Grace and Bo are there.
So beautiful. Such a beautiful scene.
So beautiful.
But yeah, that scene where they're keeping in time with the jig, and it's like, it makes you think about cultures that hold music intrinsically dear, use music to communicate like ideals and history and knowledge, to just pass this sort of information on to the next generation. And you see that in a lot of African peoples, you see that in a lot of indigenous peoples, and you see that with Irish peoples as well, which is why we hear this song that he's singing from hundreds of years ago.
It's called Rocky Road to Dublin.
Yes. There is something beautiful in that overlap, in that connectivity through the music, through the expression of self that we share, that we had independently and we found in common. That if you hear, like, I don't know if you've experienced this, Fadzai, but to hear a song in a language you don't understand from a different African nation or from an indigenous people. I've felt it with like the Haka. When I hear the Haka, something moves through me. When I hear native Hawaiian music, but it's gorgeous. There's something so spiritual about it, is the only word I can think of that like connects these people. So it's like, there's just something there in that community that he's seeking. There's a reason that he seeks out black people specifically, in my opinion, despite all his antics and what he does to them.
They're the ones doing the thing, conjuring these spirits that it seems the intention is that he wants access to that power to be like, oh, I can see my fallen friends, be they vampires or just regular Irishmen, if I'm able to assimilate this boy into my vampire coven.
You can bring them here and we can all have a key. Yeah. And I think the thing you said earlier about the church, because keeping on the music thing, there's something about music historically for people providing an escape and a comfort, right? As Black people, we sing when things go wrong. That's just how it is. Certainly how we are in our family. When my mom randomly out of nowhere, back when I was living at home, she would just start singing in the middle of the day, and it's like this really strangely mournful song in its wording, but the music itself is very like swaying and like moving. It's just like, what's gone wrong? What's going on, man? What's the mood here? It's just like we turn to that when there is no other good going on in that time. And you mentioned religion and how Preacher Boy's father was spinning a similar tale to Remmick about like trust in the Lord despite the Jim Crow that's happening around us, despite the sharecropping, despite the fact that we can only be in certain places, despite the fact that we have to build our own juke joint because they won't let us in the white ones. Like even I forget his name, but the older singer that Sammy becomes sort of protege to, talking about the blues, talking about the group that he got together and their plight. Is just like, and we sing to just like either ignore the problem or console ourselves during the problem. And there's just something to do with that and the vampirism, because like you say, Remmick spinning similar tale to just be like, hey, your life is hard. Why not become a vampire?
Remmick,
get away from the race of it.
The culture vulture vampire who's like, I heard Black people doing some magic that I am aware of, but that I haven't been able to find in this land being done by any of the white people. Doesn't ask Sammy to do him the solid of conjuring up his ancestors. Doesn't explain fully what he's just like, I'm just gonna make you mine. It's very similar to his father being like, it's not that I have a problem with music, it's that rock music and that blues music you're doing. That's the well, I guess proto rock. That kind of music that you're playing is the wrong kind. But you can do music my way. And it's like, well, Remmick is also kind of doing that. He's like, I'm gonna let you be a musician as my vampire progeny who I control and whose conjuring skills I use for my benefit. I'm not so interested in your agency, but I'm not racist.
Yeah, because it's like you love the idea of a hive mind in a certain way where we're all connected through this gift, but if there's one person running the hive mind, then it's not really a hive mind, is it? But yeah, love that Smoke killed the KKK dude at the end, riddled him with bullets. It's like, we're not letting that guy get away. Love that he saw his baby that passed away with Annie. I love that they were in white.
Other side.
The other side, bitch. The other side. It exists still in this world.
This is pre-season 5.
Yeah. That's Vampire Diaries stuff, listener. Don't worry about it.
I love Annie being like, I don't want you to get smoke on her. And I'm like, aren't you dead? But okay. She's like, even deceased, we will not smoke around children.
God, I love Annie. I love that everybody listened to a woman who knew what she was talking about. We were just talking about Nosferatu and how nobody's listening to Ellen. They listen to Annie.
Oh, and you mentioned the hive mind. The hive mind that is not entirely under Remmick's control, because they do retain some semblance of their personality.
Oh, absolutely.
It's why Cornbread is so funny when he's trying to lie.
Again, that's an uncle I know.
It's why Annie goes inside and the first thing she does is, okay, I'm gonna bang my former flame, then I'll turn
Mary,
him.
you mean?
Sorry, Mary, yes. And then later on when Annie dies, that sort of breaks the control that Remmick has over her because she's quite upset.
The look on her face, yeah. Similarly with Stack, when Smoke lets him go. While it's not clear if it's the death of Remmick that releases him or if it's that moment that releases him. But their freedom and their choice to... And that's the thing too, I was speaking to one of the friends I was watching a movie with, I was speaking... Because he was very distressed by that post-credit scene or mid-credit scene of them continuing to live as vampires and inviting Sammy as an older man to join them, because he felt that was a perpetuation of Remmick's, like, the thing that he found of Remmick to be the poison of the story. He was like, you as Black people, effectively, he took issue a lot with Haley Steinfeld, but we won't get into that. You guys as people who experience this turning to this guy and saying, hey, wouldn't you like to? And I was like, I think it's a different experience now that Remmick's gone. I think that now that they're fully in control of themselves and they've lived lives as these vampires, they have a different view of it. It is still somewhat sad. We know Stack says that line at the end about it, the last time I saw my brother was the last time I saw the sun. God, I started crying. But yeah, it is still a different experience for them. They're clearly in some semblance of equilibrium in their lives now. So to them now, it's a gift to Sammy that they're offering.
And he makes an actual offer. He asks. Right. And Sammy says, no thanks. And he's like, okay.
Cool.
That's fine.
That's the key thing to a choice. But, why was I talking about that? God. Oh, you were talking about the hive mind and when they became themselves. Yeah.
I was so worried when they showed up at the end. I was like, are they going to hurt him? And why are they choosing to do it now so many decades later?
Way.
And they were like, no, we just wanted to hear your song again because we were there when you first, performed these shows live. We were in the audience hiding in the background. But the actual recorded music from that era is really bad quality now. So we want to hear it one last time live.
Want to hear it in the boom bass, in the speakers, in the subwoofers, everything, bitch. We want to hear you licking on that electric guitar. Oh, they did ask him to specifically do the acoustic one like old times. That was lovely.
Also kind of unnerving that Stack was able to smell on Sammy that he doesn't have long left. I was like, is he sick?
I love when that
happens. Can you just smell that his body is reaching the end of its tether?
I love when vampires have weird abilities like that where it's like you can smell illness and death because you should. You're so proximal to that. It's just odd enough that it puts me in the right mindset about vampires. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Love the eyes, too.
Oh, God, love the eyes. I think I did tell you this. I love looking at all the different eyes of vampires. It's one of the reasons True Blood has the most disappointing vampire faces for me because it's just their teeth, and it's not even the right teeth. It's like the outer upper incisors and not the actual canines. And their eyes look entirely the same. And it's like Vampire Diaries and Van Helsing and Buffy. They all have it's usually the eyes. Buffy, they look hideous even besides the eyes.
Brow shifting, cheeks sunken, buccal fat removed.
The Master gets the worst of it. He's got like the bat nose, which was intentional.
The Master was a Nosferatu pastiche, as far as I could tell.
Yes, that's also why he's bald. But the way his nose is shaped was supposed to be indicative of certain types of bats, like the pig-nosed bat.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I see it now in my mind.
Yes.
Yeah. But True Blood, though, similarly to Sinners, is the way that the vampires die with this explosion of blood and like viscera. I found that fascinating.
Oh, they're really
True Blood
messy.
Is more gory and gross and sticky, but Sinners there's like a succulence.
I mean, Sinners even just their drool, which is also venomous. It's the first time I've seen vampire venom since like Twilight, where it's like, one bite from them and it's over. You're either gonna bleed out and come back as a vampire unless we stake you preemptively. The different eye colors that were unique to each vampire reminded me of Van Helsing, where of the three brides, the blonde one, Mariska, had glowing yellow eyes. Alira, the redhead, had like purplish eyes, and Verona, the brunette one, had blue eyes.
I like that they were color-coded in their vampire forms. It was so they were like bright pink and bright blue as they flew around sowing terror amongst Transylvanians. So much fun.
I need another Dracula adaptation to make the brides as important to the story as Van Helsing did, because
give me the brides. That's the best part of it. Oh, and what's his name? Australian actor. Not Wenham. That's the dad from Iron Fist. Richard Roxburgh.
Oh, yes.
Brilliant as Dracula. Inspired. Any other final thoughts on Sinners?
No, that's all.
Okay. All I'll say is there is a podcast called X of Words. It's an X-Men podcast, but they also do other media. Mutual of mine runs it, and they did a 2-hour Sinners special a couple weeks ago, which I have not yet listened to, though I promised to that weekend because I knew I wanted to talk about it and I didn't want it to influence my opinion. So right after this, I will be listening to it, and you should too, because they do great shit over there. That's X of Words, XOFWORDS on Twitter, and I think Blue Sky, and you should be able to find it's the most recent thing they've done. So yeah, enjoy that. And I guess that's it. We don't have an outro for this too. It's set up. So weird.
Spin-off episode ends. Email us at animalattackpod@gmail.com. Tweet us at animattackpod. That's at ANIMALATTACK Attack Pod, cheers.